What was the hardest part of it all for you when we were going through it?
Oh, I think the hardest thing was not knowing what was going to happen, having no understanding of eating disorders, and I think it was that isolation. And one of the hardest things was that all I knew was Lena Zavaroni, who was a protege in the 60s. She had an eating disorder and she died, and all I could think was, my daughter's got an eating disorder and she's going to die. And that was the only thing. I couldn't get past that for a long time, and whenever you ate food, I used to have my head in the sand thinking you didn't have an eating disorder. But then, as the years rolled on, and we realised then that, you know, this was no quick fix, there was no easy answer to any solution. It was, you know, a long journey, and it was 13 years. Yeah, I think it was that isolation and not really knowing, you know, what was going to happen. All I knew was Lena Zavaroni had an eating disorder and she died, and that's what I thought you was going to do. I thought you was going to die, and in fact there was 4 times where we did nearly lose you, and it was heartbreaking because at the time, you know, we didn't know where to turn to. We were trying to juggle family, was trying to juggle looking after you, and it was a really difficult time trying to juggle work commitments as well. And having nobody to turn to was the biggest thing. And I think one of the other things that we found really difficult was when you didn't want us to tell anybody, and we were sort of like shutting ourselves off from family and friends because they all knew something was matter, but we didn't have that. We were trying to be loyal to you, and we didn't have we didn't want to spoil the trust that we built up, and we didn't want to tell anybody because that's not what you wanted to happen. But I think in truth, Jen, I think they all knew. So yeah, it was difficult.
Even like when I went into the psychiatric unit, you told people then though, surely?
That's when you gave us sort of your permission to tell
It's so
people.
funny how much I don't remember.
But you were existing on 5 complex and a sherry glass of water a day, Gemma. And you know, there was only one way you was going, and that was either in a hospital bed or in a psychiatric unit.
Yeah.
You know, fighting for your life. It was just the worst time ever. I can't tell you, but you know, I think with your journey, it's been a 13-year long battle, but yeah, as you know, saying what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. You've certainly come through a stronger person. Really, really proud of you.
Thank you. I think, you know, I'm proud of you too. Gosh, I try not to have like regrets, because obviously Siege wouldn't exist and this educational toolkit wouldn't exist, and we wouldn't be making a difference without the journey that we went through. And you know, like I always say, you can grow flowers where dirt used to be, and I don't regret it in terms of the years that I lost, because now we're doing something good. But I do really, really, I think the biggest regret and hurt for me out of all of it is what you and Dad went through and what me siblings went through. You know, and I think that's one of the things, like with Seed, where we try and get people to understand the magnitude of what the eating disorder actually does, because it doesn't just destroy the sufferer, it destroys the carers and those around them. And you know, it just breaks my heart to think, you know, those times where you had to like drive miles away from home, and there was still, you know, our Chris at home, and you know, just taking you away from them as well. But I think it's good that, I don't know about you, but I felt angry for a long time.
Really?
I felt angry at the system.
Okay.
For a long time, that I didn't get the help and support that I needed early on.
What was your biggest concern then when you first developed your eating disorder? What was the biggest thing for you?
Do you know, the biggest fear was that I didn't know what was going on. Honest to goodness, I remember one day just waking up and feeling completely different. And that's the honest truth. There was nobody had ever called me fat. Nobody had ever you know, I was popular at school, wasn't I? You know, nobody had ever sort of ridiculed me or said a bad word. But the bullying was just all... Because I couldn't show you what was going on physically, like, the bullying seemed to be, like, mentally for me.
Yeah.
But it wasn't to do with how I looked. Like, it wasn't... It was jealousy, but it wasn't to do with, like, my weight, if that makes sense. And I just remember one day waking up and feeling fat and totally different. And this whole thing just started to take over my mind. And I think that's the biggest misconception about having an eating disorder. It's not a choice. You know, and even, like, you know, even to this day, I have to really battle to keep it in check, in all honesty. And I have to be really self-aware, and I have to be really mindful, and I have to be really honest and open with you as my parents. But I think it's really important to be brave as well, you know, to talk. And I think, you know, one of the biggest things for me with the series of the toolkit and with everything, it's just encouraging kids, teachers, parents to talk and be open, because it can just take away so much of your life if you don't, you know. And I'm forever grateful and thankful that you went out there and educated yourself as parents to understand what it's like to go through an eating disorder, because if it weren't for that understanding, I don't think I'd be here today, Mum. So, thank you, and I love you to bits.